Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Pastor Chris. I'm coming to you live from Lexington Park Baptist Church. This is PC Studios. It is September the 23rd, 2024. How in the world are you doing? Hope you're blessed and highly favored by God. Hey, listen, we're into fall. Can you believe that? We're already in the fall. I love this time of year. My allergies get a little crazy, but what a beautiful time. The beautiful weather, the weather's changing. Anyway, looking forward to the fall season. As always, it's football and all that stuff. Don't say anything, Keith. I know you're out there. I already know you're wearing your orange. So anyway, everybody else, so enjoy this beautiful weather that God gives us this time of year, and just enjoy the seasons of life. So today we're finishing up, or this week we'll finish up this Back to Church campaign, looking at the invite, looking at the importance of church, and then now the impact. What's the impact of Jesus? So today and this week we're going to talk about Zacchaeus. And I know some of you say Zacchaeus and Zychaeus, and I've always grown up Zacchaeus. So anyway, I think tomato, whatever it might be, what we're raised up on with. But learning from the life of Zacchaeus and what that means to us, the impact that Jesus can have in our lives when we are with him and we follow him and we're doing church with him. I mean, I know this was not church, this was a crowd, but whenever you get a crowd gathered and they're gathered for Jesus, that's church, folks. That's church. So Jesus was constantly teaching us what church was supposed to be like when he was on this earth. And so when we get to Luke chapter 9, we start to see this. So today, I want us to talk about we need to let Jesus impact our lives, not our past. Sometimes we have a hard time letting go of our past, or we hold on to things. We can't forgive, or we can't forgive ourselves, or our past haunts us. Those are all real issues we all have to deal with, and Zacchaeus is no exemption of this. But I want you to see what happens as we unfold this week. Your past should not hold you back. And nor should anybody. We're going to learn when we get down to verse 7 later on this week. There's always going to be complainers and critics that want to hold you back. Don't let them. You need to continue to focus on Jesus and move forward with Jesus. So let's read this. I'm assuming you know the story. I'm only going to focus on the first two verses today. And it says in chapter 19, verse 1. He entered Jericho and was passing through. There was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. I just want us to focus on those two verses. You may say, man, why that? Well, what I want you to see is Jesus has got a crowd, and he's passing through. And then let's look at this man, Zacchaeus. And then this week will unfold what Jesus does in his life. And so for us today, I want us just to look at those things, right? Let's look at just those things. So verses 1 and 2. 1, Jesus was on his way to Jericho, and he had already gathered crowds. So Jesus had been doing things. Jesus had been changing people's lives. Jesus had been healing the sick. Jesus probably had raised the dead at this point. So rumors had gotten to why Zacchaeus is going to end up being curious in verses 3 and 4 is because of what he's heard. So I want to encourage you today is that just know that Jesus is always passing by. Jesus is always available. And Jesus always wants to intervene in your life. And so in this instance, Jesus will intersect with the life of Zacchaeus. Their paths will cross. I think in our lives, God gives us opportunities. I didn't really get into this Sunday, but I think God gives us opportunities to meet him. It could be through people. It can be through a church. It can be through a friend. It can be through family. It can be through a prayer. It could be through a dream. It can be through a lot of ways. But I think Jesus wants to intersect in our lives and gives us opportunities. This is Zacchaeus' opportunity. So I want to encourage everyone And then this is his opportunity for salvation, because we're going to find out at the end, right? We get to verse 9. Salvation's come to your house, Zacchaeus, today, because Zacchaeus was changed, was impacted by Jesus. And so I think God may give us more than one opportunity. I think there's a salvific opportunity. Jesus wants us to get saved, and Jesus wants the church to be about salvation. We want salvation to come to our house every single week, you all. We should want salvation in the house of the Lord. We should want salvation to come upon each other's houses. We want to see our family, our spouses, our children, our grandchildren, our uncles, our nephews, our nieces, our aunts, and all these, grandparents. We want everybody to come to know Jesus. And Jesus will provide people with opportunities. Now, Zacchaeus could have just ignored Jesus. But we find tomorrow we'll talk about in verse 3 and 4, he becomes curious though. But at this point, I want us just to talk about Zacchaeus and who he was. So, and who you were and who I was. Listen, we all have a past. We all have mistakes. We all have sins. And Jesus doesn't want us to cling to those things. Jesus wants us to move beyond them. And in Zacchaeus' life, we look right here in verse 2. He is a tax collector and he is rich. In his day and time, he would have had a higher socioeconomic status, so people would have wanted to be his friend to get the fringe benefits from that. But as a tax collector, he would have, one, put the taxes of the Rome upon the citizenship, and he probably would have extorted over these people, added levies for himself, if you will. That's how he got rich, right? He would take advantage of situations and people. He had the power to put people in jail. He had tax collectors in this day had a great deal of power from the Roman Empire. And so they were not highly liked. We see this with the Pharisees did not like them because they represented Rome. And then the common folk didn't like them because they got taken advantage of. And so I shared something. I mean, who likes an IRS? Unless you work for IRS, you don't like IRS. I mean, IRS is not your friend, right? That's nobody. And it's not that. We should be, all of us, I want to make sure it's clear. We need to pay what we owe to Caesar. Jesus tells us that. Give unto Caesar what's Caesar's. Render unto Caesar what's Caesar's, but render unto God what's God's. So, but there also needs to be integrity and honesty, and tax collectors were not known for that. And so Zacchaeus is not going to be well known. As he steps out, or he's going to be well known, he's not going to be well liked. And so his past, we will see in verse 7, will haunt him to some degree. They complain about him. Who is this Jesus that's hanging out with this sinner, this tax collector, this guy that's corrupt, right? And I think Jesus in this story shows us that we can move beyond our past. We can be changed. The impact of Jesus is that we change. The impact of Jesus is that our past doesn't have to define us. The impact of Jesus is that our present and our future can be different. The impact of Jesus is that you can become a new creation. You can be a new person. And you may say, I've already had Jesus in my life and I've returned to old habits, or I make mistakes. I've made some big mistakes even after becoming a Christian. Listen, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. All the disciples went into hiding. So listen, we all make mistakes. And again, those mistakes cannot define us. We need to allow the grace of Christ, the mercy of Christ, the forgiveness of Christ. Now we need to own up. We're going to learn from Zacchaeus. He owns up to his sin. Whether it's the first time salvation coming to your life or downstream as a Christian, you've done things wrong. We own up to it and take responsibility the best that we can. We seek forgiveness. We extend forgiveness. We seek to really radically change our lives, see Christ move in our lives in a way that we're changed. That should be the impact of Jesus and the church in our lives. We should start to see these things happening. Now, some people, it just doesn't happen, right? And by the way, there's no perfect church. There's no perfect Christian. You're never going to get this perfect. We're always going to make mistakes. Some of us make bigger mistakes than others. And again, we're comparing things with each other. But I think there are certain things that a person can do that have greater consequences. Obviously, murder, we'll just take that. Most of us are not murderers, but Jesus even speaks of if you cry out on a person in anger, you murder a person in your heart. That doesn't mean you're a murderer like physically, right? The effect of that, right? But internally in your heart, you've done those things. And so Jesus wants us to rise above our past and even in our present, learn to live underneath his influence. Zacchaeus is going to be a perfect example of that. He's going to be a person, we don't hear of him again. We can only assume that his life is radically changed. We don't know that the people embraced him. We don't know that he didn't go on as a tax collector, right? In fact, he probably did, but how he did it probably changed. He probably wasn't extorting people anymore because he said he would pay them back. He wasn't taking advantage of scenarios, but he probably still fulfilled his obligation to the Roman Empire, and he probably did levy taxes on people. He just didn't do it corruptly anymore. So I just want to encourage you as we look at this man Zacchaeus. Maybe you can relate to him, maybe you can't. Maybe your past, maybe you're like, hey, I'm a pretty good person. Maybe you're like, man, I was a dirtbag. I was bad. Wherever you fall in that spectrum, God is with you, and Jesus is coming to town. And Jesus comes and passes through your life. And when he does, it's not about your past. It's about the impact he can have on your life. And that's what we're going to see with Zacchaeus, because Jesus will end up radically changing this man. And I think it's an example for all of us. And if Jesus can change this Zacchaeus, he can change you and me. And how do we do that? We may be going in the crowd following Jesus, and Jesus steps into our life like he does in Zacchaeus, and then something radical happens. When that happens, you need to follow Jesus, you all. You need to let Jesus change you, transform you, make you into what he wants. Follow his lead. Do what he tells you to do. Make sure, like Zacchaeus, seek forgiveness of others, reconcile, restore things, have redemption come into your life, into your home, into your house, and be the man or woman of God he's called you to be. So I'm excited about this week as we look into this story of this man, this chief tax collector, this corrupt guy, how this curiosity makes him seek Christ, how he ignores the complainers to continue to be focused on Jesus, and how Jesus brings salvation to his life and to others and reminds us that Jesus has come to seek what is lost so that it may be found. And I pray right now, if there's anybody out there, if Jesus is seeking you, let him find you. Don't try to play hide and seek with Jesus. When Jesus finds you, just say, here I am, Lord. Here I am, Lord. And be like Zacchaeus. Be a changed person. Hey, have a great day. May God change you. And remember these two realities. God loves you. So do I. I'll see you here tomorrow. Take care.